Well, we have already kind of highlighted the fact that, federal level decriminalization feels a long way away. And I heard what you said about let's, start local, let's go ahead and build momentum and work to move these things forward. But I have to say that I am not as hopeful as I would like to be. We spoke to Alice Little recently about sort of the moral mood and the direction of legal sex work. And I guess I'm really curious, Jack, how you feel about the future of this debate and what we can maybe anticipate in the next, 5-10 years in terms of progress.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about especially that soon, like that does feel soon to me, especially because of where we're at currently.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we will see is we will see some changes in the law. I don't know whether they'll be good or bad in the UK. I know that currently in the UK there are bills that are being pushed through. We're going to see what happens with them, that are including things to do with the Nordic model, for example, which are being pushed by certain MPs. And either those things will gain traction in a way that causes harm in the UK and institutes potentially the Nordic model, which for me feels like the worst case scenario. No one's really pushing for full criminalization here right now, but the Nordic model is being pushed for. Or it being struck down starts a wider conversation, and perhaps we will end up with some more discussion of decriminalization in the UK rather than the shitty legal model we have right now. So I think that will have an effect, and that will be in the next year that gets like discussed publicly. They haven't actually released the details of the specific bill. It's one being pushed by Diana Johnson, who's an MP. She also tried to have some things added to the current police crime and sentencing bill, trying to criminalize buying sex, which was rejected from the current bill. It was not added. I don't know if that's still being pushed for currently, but I know that it has, as of currently, not yet been added to the bill. So there seems to be at least some pushback internally in the government, because this is just one MP suggesting something and other MPs refusing to add it to existing legislation they're trying to push through. So either they think that's going to cause enough of a fuss to harm the legislation as a whole, or they're not interested. And I don't know which one that is, but that's at least somewhat promising. They imagine there's going to be some kind of pushback which would harm their bill. If they imagine there's going to be some kind of pushback, maybe that means that they won't push for the Nordic model in the long term. We'll see. But I think in the US, I'm seeing some traction being gained by the decriminalization movement. Most people in the US don't seem to know much about the current state of things other than that it is fully criminalized. But people in the UK have that impression sometimes. I have clients who assume that it's illegal for them to pay for sex, and they'll make a comment to me about how they're breaking the law while they're here. And I'm like, no, you aren't. I have good news for you. You are not currently doing anything criminal. But they have that impression. So I think in terms of the general public, we don't have a ton of hope of them really knowing much about it. But in some ways that can work in people's favor, because if the general public are completely uneducated, you don't have to counter a lot of bullshit. You just present your case as it is. They haven't been like inoculated against you giving them this information. And also it means that a small group of people being very loud has a huge effect. Because if the average person doesn't know shit about sex work and isn't inclined to talk about it, they're not going to fight you on it when you say this legislation is garbage. When it comes to in-person sex work anyway. Obviously with online stuff, the conversation is a lot more complicated. And that's why we've had this massive problem with like Foster Sester and then with Cisia online, like these kinds of issues where, because it's regulating online stuff and the conversation is framed around children, there's a massive panic immediately.
Sure.
And people see online stuff as being very different, including when that's soliciting. But when we're talking about people selling sex, like on an individual level, there isn't a lot of real messaging about how we're supposed to feel like about that other than negatively. But not really the reasons why culturally. Like most people are like, sex work is bad. I don't have many reasons to believe that, but it's just like a thing I'm told. So I think that's easier to counter. So I think maybe in the next 10 years, we could see at least a couple of states, decrim getting a foothold, maybe decriminalization in New York, for example. I know that in Manhattan, they've decided to stop prosecuting people for prostitution as of recently. I think that was in the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
They've just said, like, we're not going to arrest people for soliciting. There's still massive issues there. That means people can still be arrested for buying, which they haven't said then they're going to stop arresting for. People can still be arrested for brothel keeping. I'm sure raids will happen still, but we won't have individual stings, and there won't be individuals being arrested for soliciting according to them. And that's a good step in terms of saying, well, it's working in Manhattan and there's less crime around sex work. Maybe we could expand this to a larger area, and maybe then you get decrim at some point in the state, and then maybe other states follow suit. I think 10 years from now, it's reasonable to think that at least several states could have decriminalized sex work by then, and that in the UK, either things get worse or they get better. My hope is better. We'll see.
Yeah, they tend to get worse or get better. But you said that a loud, well-informed minority can really make an impact here, and I have to say you've done a remarkable job in the last hour of informing our audience. So my question then becomes, what impact can they have? If somebody is listening to this right now, what opportunities do they have to push for change?
Calling your local representatives about any bill relating to sex work after informing yourself about it, talking to them about decriminalization and making sure that you are specific, not just saying that you don't want people to be arrested for this thing or that thing, but talking about decriminalization as a concept and then saying what specifically you want done. Sending out emails if you're too anxious to make a phone call, although most of the time you're just going to be getting an answering machine if you're someone who's nervous about that. Your local representative is probably not going to pick up the phone to you. You can do things like that. You can also sign petitions, but also just showing up to things.
Oh no, we seem to have lost Jack again.